The 90s were a decade of great progress in games. Some of us were kids at the time, or teens, or even adults. But the enjoyment these games provided was unmatched. The games of this time had you racing back from school or work to switch on your favorite console, sit down, and dive in new worlds and realities. It is also safe to say that this era had a big impact on the video games industry as a whole. Some of the greatest games were made in this era that still thrive today. Now, with that out of the way, let's go back in time to explore this iconic nostalgic era and have a look at some of the most popular games back then. Final Fantasy. You can't talk 90s without the iconic Final Fantasy series. This franchise released its 6th game in 1994. It is still considered one of the best games to this day. The 7th Final Fantasy was also a big hit with a large volume of 3D characters. The 7th version was released in 1997. Final Fantasy was so popular, especially in Japan. Roughly speaking, it is a complicated story that gradually unravels. Final Fantasy excels in all the major areas of RPG games thanks to its unforgettable soundtrack, engrossing story, well-designed combat mechanics, and of course, charismatic characters. Metal Gear Solid: Solid Snake. If you ever hear the name Hideo Kojima and wonder why he is so popular, you can look at the Metal Gear Solid series for answers. This legendary game was one of the most popular games in the 90s. It was released in 1998. In this game, players control a soldier who uses stealth to break into a nuclear weapons facility to neutralize the terrorist threat from a renegade special forces unit. The player must free the hostages and prevent the terrorists from launching a nuclear strike. The game has many brilliant game mechanics, from using Snake cigarettes to detect laser, to hiding with boxes, to even using wolf pee to cover the smell. The game set stealth as a video game genre, and was the first to provide cinematic shots based on the game's engine. The game was critically acclaimed and sold like hot cakes, so it wouldn't be surprising that it still ranks among the 100 most powerful games in gaming history.
It's me, Mario!
Super Mario 64. Who doesn't know Super Mario? This game is one of the most popular games in the world. Super Mario was a hero and a role model for young children. He was the brave one who defies monsters and goes through many difficulties and challenges in order to save the princess in the Mushroom Kingdom. In 1996, the first RPG in the Mario series was released. The game's difficulty level was easy for players of all ages and especially those new to RPGs. It goes without saying that the game was so adored and loved that it thrives as a series to this day. Half-Life. Half-Life was released in November 1998. It was Valve's first game. In this game, you play as Gordon Freeman, a scientist who escapes from the Black Mesa research facility after being invaded by aliens. In the midst of his escape, he fights alien enemies and humans, with a variety of weapons in addition to solving puzzles. Half-Life became so popular thanks to its graphics, realistic gameplay, and smooth narrative. It has won over 50 awards.
The game of the decade is...
Mr. Freeman, wake up and smell the ashes.
Oh my god, it's the G-Man! Half-Life 2!
This game has inspired many developers, and later on we saw the release of several games that mimic some of Half-Life's mechanics, most notably Counter-Strike. The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda is an action-adventure video game series. It was first released in 1998 and was published by Nintendo. The series was acclaimed by millions of players around the world, which expanded the popularity of open-world games. The story takes place in the Kingdom of Hyrule, where the main character is a boy named Link, who has to rescue Princess Zelda from the evil Ganon. And just like many other games on this list, this series is still being released to this day. Pokémon. The Pokémon series, much like Mario, has had a great impact on pop culture in general and the video games industry specifically. This game was released in 1996. Its existence has continued to this day without losing its popularity or being lost to time. It is actually increasing in popularity with time, and very significantly, might we add. The famous cartoon series Pokémon was actually inspired by this game, and it was popular all over the world. Street Fighter You've probably heard of Street Fighter. It was one of the most famous games back in the 90s. It is a fighting game for the Super Nintendo and Neo Geo, released in 1996. A total of 18 unique characters fighting in the world of street fighting, some for training and some for revenge. Some of the game's mechanics included, but were not limited to, aerial guard, which prevents attacks while jumping, and down avoidance, which regains posture when receiving a down attack. If you consume the Super Combo level gauge, you can use the powerful special moves Super Combo, Zero Counter to quickly release the guard and counter attacks, and Original Combo that speeds up the movement for a certain period of time. All of these game mechanics made the game very enjoyable and thus popular at the time. And it still is, as Capcom recently announced the coming of the 6th installment of the game. Metal Slug. Metal Slug is an action shooting game where you control the player character and capture the stage where the enemy awaits while making full use of shots, jumps, and grenades. It was first released in 1996 and got many new versions later on. The Metal Slug series is one of the most popular games on Neo Geo thanks to its exciting level backdrops and so many other elements that made the game enjoyable and unforgettable.
Mission complete.
Bomberman. Bomberman was specifically made for the Neo Geo. It's an action-based maze arcade game made in 1997. It is one of the most popular Neo Geo games. In this game, gamers take control of Bomberman's character, and you basically place bombs to block monsters in the maze to destroy them. Once all the monsters are dead, you move to the next level, and it gets harder with every new level. Need for Speed. Need for Speed is one of the most popular racing games in the world. It was launched in 1994 and had a great success, making it one of the most important games of the 90s. Its main goal was to make the player experience the feeling of driving a sports car, and maybe achieving that goal is what made it so popular. The game continued to make great progress with each new version. The vehicles were improved, and the track and the racing background were improved to become one of the most realistic racing games ever made. The game came a long way, from just rudimentary polygon graphics to one of the most important games of the 90s. Resident Evil. Resident Evil is a survival horror game. In fact, it invented the genre and embodied it so beautifully, which is probably why it is so successful. It was released in 1996, but make no mistake, it continues to be released even today. And what distinguished this game was its new approach to the horror genre, implementing the survival aspect cleverly to make for a scarier experience. The story of the game revolves around special operatives exploring the forest near their town. After receiving several reports of dead corpses that looked like they were eaten, the first team, Bravo, went to investigate but failed to report back, which prompted the more experienced team, Alpha, to follow up. Once these highly trained operatives landed, they were in for a big surprise of decaying dogs, humans, and even crows in a big mansion of mystery. It's hard not to fall in love with this game, and we aren't surprised by its popularity. Tomb Raider 1996. This game marks the birth of the famous Tomb Raider series. This series is famous for the character of Lara Croft, an intrepid archaeologist who takes you on her adventures to explore different places and solve mysteries. The game is inspired by Egyptian antiquities, Tank Girl, and Indiana Jones. The team made a clear effort to build the dimensions of the character so the game had a distinctive spirit. The game didn't just have a compelling gameplay with fun puzzles and beautiful environments, but it also had a great narrative. Starcraft. Starcraft is a military sci-fi real-time strategy series of games. Its first release was in 1998, and it was very popular back then. The story of the game is about 3 intelligent species fighting for dominance in a fictional world in the 25th century, more specifically in a part of the Milky Way called the Caprulo Sector. Tony Hawk Pro Skater. This game was released in 1999. It is a skateboarding video game developed by Neversoft and published by Activision. It was inspired by the real skateboarding champion, Tony Hawk, who was a gamer and actually helped in the development of the game by helping the developers understand skateboarding moves. It is ranked as one of the top 3 games of all time on Metacritic. What probably made it that popular is the prevalence of skating back then, especially for young people who already loved gaming. The game had good graphics, for the time, great music, and compelling maps and moves. When you go back and look at these games, you'll feel the huge difference between them and today's games due to the huge progress that games now know. Graphics are better, plots more interesting, characters more relatable, voice acting more professional, and so on and so forth. However, it would be a flat-out lie not to credit these games and this era for the huge development and mainstream popularity of video games. These games set the tone for how games are today. Some games made today with great graphics and every tool in the book still fail to match these games. With that said, we hope you enjoyed this walk down memory lane, and we will see you next time.